A long time ago, in a quiet village called Abaka, there lived a girl named Yuku. Everyone in the village knew who she was. People noticed her the moment she walked by. She had bright eyes, smooth skin, and a natural beauty that made strangers pause just to look at her. But beauty wasn't the only thing that made her unforgettable. There was something else about her, something that made people step back the moment she appeared. Even though she looked gentle, the entire village feared her. Yuku didn't behave like the other girls in Abaka. She didn't laugh with friends. She didn't smile at neighbors, and she never joined the women who gathered to tell stories. She always looked serious, as if she carried a storm inside her. What frightened people the most was how much she hated men. She didn't tolerate them being near her. If any man tried to speak to her, she reacted before he even finished his sentence. Yuku didn't argue, didn't shout, she fought. Hard. Many men in Abaka had learned this the painful way. Some walked around the village with black eyes, some with bruised ribs, and some couldn't sit properly for days. They all had the same warning for each other: stay away from Yuku. Even those who admired her beauty didn't dare approach her. Her name wasn't spoken like the name of a beautiful girl, it was whispered like a warning. One morning, Yuku went to the village market to buy food. The market was busy as always. Women were bargaining loudly, children were running around, and vendors were shouting prices. Yuku walked through the crowd without greeting anyone. Her expression stayed cold and unreadable. She picked some vegetables and was ready to leave when a young man rushing through the market accidentally bumped into her shoulder. Before he even realized what he had done, Yuku's hand flew through the air and struck him across the face. The slap echoed like a clap of thunder. The entire market went silent. People froze in place, eyes wide, waiting to see what she would do next. The man's face turned red instantly. He didn't try to argue. He didn't even raise his head. With fear in his eyes, he bowed quickly and stuttered, I'm sorry," then ran away as fast as he could. The women at the market looked at each other and whispered, she did it again. But no one stepped forward to confront her. Everyone pretended to return to their business, though their hands shook and their voices trembled. Yuku walked away, calm as ever, as if nothing had happened. But the fear in the market grew even stronger. That day, still, despite her fierce reputation, men in the village continued to admire her beauty. Some believed they could change her. Some thought that if they spoke kindly enough, she would soften. Others thought they were brave enough to handle her anger. They were all wrong. One by one, men tried to win her heart. They brought gifts, fruits, handmade jewelry, and sweet promises. Yuku didn't fall for any of it. She saw every attempt as a trick, every smile as a trap. Whenever a man came too close, she beat him without hesitation. Many left her home limping, or holding their swollen faces. Even those who begged for mercy received none. To Yuku, kindness from men was only a mask hiding danger. She refused to let anyone near her. The village chief even believed his son would be the exception. She won't dare touch my boy, he said proudly. But the moment his son tried to charm her, Yuku punched him so hard he lost 2 teeth. The chief's son returned home unrecognizable. And the chief himself, though furious, knew better than to challenge her. Soon, the elders grew worried. They gathered in silence and discussed her behavior. They wondered why she hated men so deeply. Why she reacted like someone defending herself from an unseen threat. They decided to call Yuku to the village square. When the day came, people gathered. From all corners of Abaka, men, women, and even children came to see what would happen. Yuku walked into the square with her back straight and her head high. She did not look nervous. She did not look ashamed. She stood before the elders like a warrior standing before her enemies. One of the elders asked gently, Yuku, why do you fight the men? Another asked, why do you beat every suitor who comes your way? Yuku did not look away. Her voice was calm and sharp when she answered, I will never let a man control me. And I will never stop fighting them, the villagers gasped. Her answer shocked them. The elders were confused and troubled. They tried to ask more questions, but Yuku refused to explain anything else. She stood in silence, her eyes cold, her secrets locked inside her heart. With no explanation from her, the elders dismissed her. But the village grew even more curious. What had happened to her? Why was she filled with such rage? One hot afternoon, Yuku walked to the stream to fetch water. The sun was bright, and the path was rocky. After filling her pot, she turned to walk home, but her foot slipped, and she fell hard. The pot shattered, and pain shot up her leg. A farmer, who had been working nearby, saw her fall. He rushed toward her, wanting to help. He bent down carefully and tried to tie a cloth around her injured foot to stop the bleeding. But Yuku didn't see a man trying to help. She saw danger. She saw a threat. Before the farmer could finish tying the cloth, she struck him across the face. "Don't you dare touch me!" she shouted, her voice filled with rage. The farmer stumbled back, holding his face in shock. He tried to explain. "I was only trying to help." But Yuku didn't listen. Her anger drowned out his words. Knowing that men were not allowed to hit women in a baka, he didn't fight back. He simply stood up slowly, bruised and hurting, and walked away. The story of that moment spread through the village like wildfire. People whispered, she even beat a farmer who was only trying to help. But once again, no one confronted her. No one wanted to be the next victim of her anger. Her reputation grew more terrifying with every passing day. Not long after, her beauty caught the eye of the village prince. He was fascinated by her strength, her independence, and the mystery surrounding her. No woman in the village was like her. He believed he could win her trust. He began visiting her with gifts, fine clothes, fruits, jewelry. Yuku didn't welcome him warmly, but she didn't push him away either. She watched him cautiously each time, never letting her guard down. Villagers whispered, wondering if the prince would be the one to change her. One day, the prince invited her for a walk near the stream. The water flowed calmly, and the breeze was cool. Yuku walked beside him without complaint. The prince felt hopeful. She hadn't rejected him, and she hadn't raised her hand against him. Maybe she was finally beginning to trust him. Feeling confident, he made a mistake. He reached out to gently hold her hand. To Yuku, that touch felt like danger. Like the beginning of the same control she had feared all her life. Her temper exploded instantly. Without warning, she punched him in the chest, then struck his face. The prince tried to protect himself, but she was too strong and too fast. She kept hitting him until he fell to the ground, bruised and helpless. The prince's guards rushed to rescue him. They lifted him, battered and bleeding, and carried him back to the palace. When the villagers heard what happened, they were stunned. Even those who feared her never imagined she would attack royalty. Whispers filled the air as everyone wondered what would happen next. When the prince returned to the palace bruised and barely able to walk, the king was furious. His voice shook the walls as he roared, "Who dared to do this to my son?" Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say her name out loud. The king didn't need to hear it. He already knew. Only one person in the entire village had the strength and the fearlessness to attack the prince. It was Yuku. The king immediately sent guards to summon her. Word traveled fast. Villagers whispered to each other as the news spread. Some were terrified for Yuku. Others believed she deserved whatever punishment was coming. By the time Yuku arrived at the palace courtyard, a huge crowd had gathered. She walked through them without fear, without hesitation, her steps steady and her face unreadable. The king sat on his throne, staring at her with fiery anger. "Why did you attack my son?" he demanded. His voice echoed in the courtyard, making some villagers flinch. Yuku stood tall, her chin raised, her expression calm. She didn't say a single word. She didn't bow, she didn't tremble, and she didn't look away. Silence hung in the air. The king growled, "Speak. Why did you harm him?" But still, Yuku stayed silent. She held her secrets tightly inside her, refusing to explain herself to anyone, not even the king. Her silence only fueled the king's fury. "How dare you stand before me without answering my questions?" he shouted. The villagers whispered among themselves, wondering what could make a girl so bold, so unafraid of punishment. But then something changed in Yuku's eyes. The anger softened just a little, and a deep, quiet pain rose to the surface. Her breathing grew shaky. For the first time, the villagers saw something in her besides rage. They saw hurt. They saw fear buried under years of silence. Tears filled her eyes. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "My father," she began softly, "the man who should have protected us. He wasn't kind." The crowd fell silent instantly. Every ear leaned closer. Yuku swallowed hard as her memories spilled into the open. She described how her father treated her mother, yelling at her, pushing her around, beating her whenever he felt like it. Her mother never fought back. She was too scared to speak. Yuku's voice cracked as she continued. "One day, while my mother was pregnant, they argued, something small. But his anger was big." She paused, trying to steady herself. The villagers waited, hearts heavy. "He beat her so badly," Yuku whispered. "She lost the baby." Her tears fell freely now. "And soon after, she lost her life too." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had known. Everyone had seen Yuku's rage for years, but no one ever understood where it came from. The king's expression shifted slightly. His anger faltered. Yuku went on. "After my mother died, and my father passed not long after, I thought my suffering was over." But her voice darkened. "I was wrong." She told them how she moved to live with her uncles, hoping for safety. Instead, she saw the same cruelty repeated every day. Her uncles treated the women around them with no respect, using them, shouting at them, hurting them. Yuku watched helplessly as the wives in the house lived in fear, too scared to defend themselves. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Those men, my uncles, they were just like my father. They used their strength to control the women. They believed women were weak. They believed women had no choice." Yuku clenched her jaw. "So I made a promise to myself. I would never let any man do to me what they did to the women in my life." The villagers finally understood. Yuku's anger wasn't random. It wasn't madness. It was a shield she built from years of watching men abuse their power. A shield she believed she needed to survive. She finished quietly. "I couldn't save my mother. I couldn't save those women. But I could save myself. I would never let any man hurt me. Never again." Her tears fell, but she didn't hide them. The courtyard was silent. For the first time, the villagers saw Yuku not as a monster, but as a girl who had lived through unbearable pain. A girl who fought because fighting was the only thing she had left. The prince, who had once tried to charm her, listened with regret in his eyes. He realized how deeply he had misjudged her. He had touched her hand without understanding her fear. He had pushed too far without knowing her past. With a heavy heart, he lowered his head. When Yuku looked at him, he said softly, "I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you." His apology was sincere. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't done out of pride. It came from understanding. The king, hearing the truth, felt a shift in his own heart. He looked at the villagers and made a declaration. "No man in Abaka," he said firmly, "shall ever mistreat a woman again. Those who do will face punishment." His words spread hope through the crowd. For the first time, the village began to take Yuku's story as a lesson. The king ordered that the uncles who had abused women be brought forward. Their punishment was severe, but just. The women of the village felt safer than they had in years. They saw Yuku differently now. She wasn't just a fierce girl. They saw her as a survivor. A fighter. Someone who refused to be broken. Over time, the prince continued to visit Yuku, but this time with respect. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't touch her without asking. He spoke to her gently, allowing her to open up at her own pace. Slowly, cautiously, she began to trust him. Not because he won her, but because he honored her strength and recognized her pain. Eventually, Yuku accepted his offer of marriage, not as someone being tamed, but as someone choosing a partner who respected her. The village celebrated their union, not just for the marriage itself, but for what it symbolized: healing, growth, and a new beginning. Yuku's story spread through Abaka for generations. The tale of a girl who fought back against cruelty. A girl who refused to be controlled. A girl whose pain turned into strength, teaching an entire village the true meaning of respect. Years passed in Abaka, but the name Yuku never faded from people's minds. Children who were not even born when she fought the prince grew up hearing about the fierce girl who never backed down from any man. At first, the story was told in whispers, with fear and shock, but as time went on, the story changed. It became less about the punches she threw and more about the reason behind them. Parents told their children, listen to this story and learn. Strength is not only in muscles. Sometimes strength is in refusing to accept what is wrong. In the early years after the king's declaration, the village slowly began to change. Men thought twice before raising their hands or their voices against the women in their homes. Some struggled with their old habits, but the memory of the king's warning and the punishment of Yuku's uncles always stopped them. Women who had been silent for years started to feel a little braver. They knew that, for once, the law was on their side. And behind that law stood the memory of a girl who had refused to be broken. Yuku herself took time to heal. Even though she now lived in the palace as the prince's wife, she did not forget where she came from or what she had survived. There were nights when she woke up from nightmares, remembering her mother's cries, remembering her father's anger, remembering her uncle's cruel laughter. On those nights, she would sit alone by the window, staring at the moon, breathing slowly until her heart calmed down. The prince never forced her to talk, but whenever she chose to share, he listened. Sometimes she spoke in short sentences, sometimes in long silences broken by a few words. He never told her to move on or forget. Instead, he said, "Your story made this village change. Your pain became our lesson." Those words did not erase her scars, but they reminded her that her life had meaning beyond suffering. She was no longer just the girl who fought men. She was the woman who helped stop a cycle of cruelty. Over time, Yuku began to visit the village more often, not as a threat, but as a protector. If she heard about a man mistreating his wife or daughters, she did not stay quiet. She would go to their home, stand in the doorway with the same unshakable posture she'd always had, and say, "This will not happen here." Most men backed down the moment they saw her. They remembered the stories. They remembered the bruises. And they knew she would not hesitate if she had to defend someone again. The women of Abaka started to gather around Yuku, not in fear, but in trust. Some came to her secretly, whispering their worries about their marriages, their daughters, their sons. Yuku listened. She wasn't soft with her words, but she was honest. "Teach your daughters they are not weak," she would say. "Teach your sons that strength is not in hurting others. If they learn that, this village will be safe long after we are gone." Little by little, the village changed its idea of what it meant to be a strong man. It was no longer about who could shout the loudest or control their household with fear. The strongest men became the ones who protected their families with kindness, who respected their wives, who taught their sons that courage and cruelty are not the same thing. And whenever they forgot, the story of Yuku reminded them. Years later, children would gather in the shade of a large tree near the palace. Yuku, older now, with a few lines on her face and wisdom in her eyes, would sit among them. They would beg her, "Tell us the story again, the story of the girl who beat the prince." She would smile softly, a smile that had taken many years to grow, and she would say, "It is not a story about beating a prince. It is a story about not letting fear control your life." She would tell them about her mother, about the fear in her mother's eyes, about the baby that was never born. She would tell them about her uncles and the women who had no one to stand up for them. She would tell them how anger filled her heart and how she turned that anger into a shield. And then she would tell them about the moment she chose something different, not just to fight, but to speak, to reveal the truth in front of the king and the whole village. Some of the children would look at her with wide eyes, some with tears, some with clenched fists. She would remind them gently, "You don't have to use your fists to be strong. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is tell the truth, ask for help, or stand beside someone who is afraid." The children would nod, slowly understanding. That strength wears many faces. As the sun set over Abaka, the village no longer looked like the place where Yuku once walked alone in anger. It had become a place where girls could walk without fear of being controlled, and where boys were taught from a young age that respect was not optional. The prince, now older and wiser, ruled with a softer heart. He never forgot the day he was beaten by the girl he later married. Instead of feeling shame, he carried that memory like a reminder written on his soul. Power without respect is empty. And so the story of Yuku lived on, passed from parents to children, from elders to the young. It was told in homes, at the market, by the stream, and in the palace itself. Some told it as a warning, some as a lesson, and some as a source of courage when they felt small. But all agreed on one thing: Abaka would never be the same without her. If you are listening to this story now, far away from the village of Abaka, remember what it carries. Remember that no one deserves to live in fear inside their own home. Remember that speaking up, seeking help, and standing with those who suffer can change more than just one life. It can change an entire community. Remember that real love is never built on control, and real strength is never about causing pain. And if this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about what you learned from Yuku's journey. Maybe it taught you to respect the people around you more deeply. Maybe it reminded you to never stay silent when someone is being hurt. Maybe it showed you that even the most broken hearts can become a source of strength for others. Whatever it gave you, hold on to it. Thank you for staying with this tale until the end. If you enjoyed it, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about what part of Yuku's life meant the most to you, and don't forget to subscribe, so you can hear more powerful stories like this one. Your support helps these lessons travel even further, reaching hearts in many different places, just like yours. And always remember, stories like this are not just entertainment. They are mirrors that help us see ourselves more clearly, and windows that help us imagine a kinder, stronger world. Let Yuku's courage be a small light you carry with you into your own life, wherever you go.